All right, so let's talk about acrylic paint properties, how they're different from watercolor. All right, the first and most obvious way that acrylic paint is different from watercolor is that acrylic paint basically is plastic in a sense. One of the advantages that people like about working with acrylic is that you can get so thick with it. This is a little excessive. But the other part about acrylic is that it dries where you can create texture and you can retain the brush strokes. So this is another example of how you can build up some little bit more subtle texture and the brush strokes. The properties, it's much, obviously more thick. You can retain the brush strokes with it. It will dry to kind of almost like a plastic feel. And now we have an opaque paint. Watercolor is transparent, so you're going to be able to see through it, and it's not supposed to be super thick on top. You can cover up other areas. So we're not going to try for just flat one areas of color. We're going to build up and work with texture and loading up our brush with a few different colors. So what does that mean for you? It means you can build up values and objects differently. So you're still going to work from background to foreground, from big picture to kind of detail. When paints come, usually you have to take off a little bit in the middle, okay? Just want to make sure you guys understand that. I think most of you know how things work in life, but just in case, you know. All right, so take that out, shake it up a little bit. So now let's talk about how much paint do you need to do projects. You don't want to waste paint. Once it's taken out of the tube, it's going to dry. You're not going to be able to come back to it later because, remember, it dries to plastic. Acrylic paint dries very quickly, okay? So you do have to really watch out for it. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a later video. You can almost use like these little tabs that we took off the paint to see how much paint that I'm getting. This is a student grade, a scholastic grade. It's a good paint for learning. There's different grades of paint, and there are professional heavy body paints. We're starting with basics, all right? So you will be doing a lot of color mixing still with acrylic. One thing to watch out for is you do not want to mix colors with your brushes. What happens when you use your brush to mix color with, first off, a lot of the paint will get driven into the ferrule down here, to the middle part, and it gets really hard to clean. We're going to talk about cleaning in a minute. So that you don't want. Plus, as it's mixing, it is still unmixed in here. So then if you start painting with the same brush that you mixed with, you will get a streaky kind of quality to it. Whether you want that or not is your choice, but just to understand it. When you're mixing, these are palette knives. You can use a piece of plastic utensil from like a to-go meal. You can use a used up gift card with that, just like a sharp edge, and you can use that. Anything that you can kind of scrape off with plastic will work, okay? But as you mix, beware. If I'm trying to make a 50-50 mix of this, I can take parts, take a little bit and see, because even just this little bit of blue is gonna start making a change to this color. It's not real obvious yet. It's on my palette knife, I can see it, okay? So if I take a little bit of blue here, I'm gonna scrape that back up. We talked about trying to find like some lids, like plastic containers, that sort of thing. This is when you wanna utilize that. If you're using something porous, like absorbent, like a paper plate or something, then you're gonna lose a lot of paint. Just did that with a really, really small amount of paint to give you the idea. We got a pretty decent green out of that. You can kind of see that green, okay? That was mostly yellow with just a touch of blue. You have to really pay attention to lighter colors that are kind of weaker in a sense. Something like blue coming into it, if you put a lot of blue, it's going to overpower it, and then you're going to have to put a lot more yellow back in. So just be careful as you mix colors, okay? Last thing we have to talk about today, how to clean your brushes. So now we're going to talk about how to clean your brushes. Make sure you have not been leaving them in the tub. They cannot be in water for that long. But you can see, all right, even with it being in the tub, I got a lot of paint in here. So first off, you know, rinse it off as good as you can in there. You want to get out as much of the paint as possible. So it's a good idea to kind of rinse it. Okay, I'm just going to use the clean water there. But there's a lot of paint left in it. You can see that it's green. So your goal is to wash this until it rinses clean. Since you're doing this at home, try and find some just like mild dish soap. Whenever you start investing in your own brushes at home, just understand brush care is a big deal, because you might start getting brushes that are, you know, $20, $30, $40 as you improve with your painting and want your own materials. So you do want to take care of them as much as possible. So if you invest in better brushes, I suggest investing in some brush cleaner, but the process is the same if you were using brush cleaner. So as I was talking, you noticed I added a little bit of soap, put it in my hand, and I kind of smushed it around like that. I don't want to do this, okay, because as soon as you do that, you're ruining the shape of your brush, and it can even tangle up. So you want to try and, you know, I kind of keep with the flow of the brush. This part right here by the ferrule, by the metal part, that's where paint likes to collect, the acrylic paint. So what I do is I kind of go through with my fingernail and kind of loosen up that edge, just in case any paint has dried right there. Okay, notice I'm going with the grain of the brush. I'm not going against the grain of the brush. So at this point, I need to rinse it out. And not splash, you guys, as you're watching. Okay. When you're using dish soap, ideally, you would dilute it a little bit. I'm kind of using it full strength right now. So you may have to rinse your brushes quite a few times to get rid of the soap. Okay. If you have a little tub, ideally, you would maybe take a little bit of soap in a tub. Okay. Notice how thick, like, dish soap comes out really, really thick. Okay. If you dilute it a little bit, it's going to be a little bit more fluid. So I'm doing this a second time. I'm going to see, is there any green coming out, any green tinge? It's coming out pretty clear. I'm not getting anything. So at this point, I'm going to rinse it really good. I'm going to rinse it really well. I know I'm off camera, but you guys know. So I'm rinsing that, going with the grain of the brush once again. Okay. And then after that, the process is the same as what you've been doing with your water, like through the watercolor unit. I'm going to dry it once again, going with the direction of the brush. I'm going to get rid of any excess of water. I'm going to try and reshape it so that I'm retaining my point and the shape of the brush. You can see, as I told you, I was you know, in danger of tangling it. I did, so it's not laying flat right there. Remember, reshape your brush, and then originally, you know, I told you guys just dump them back in your tub, and I forgot to mention that as you get better quality brushes and you really want to take care of them, you don't want to put wet brushes up, because the water actually will go down into this area and it will actually make your brush you know, lose its shape, and it'll ruin kind of the binding here. So as I'm doing this, all of a sudden, look at that, there was green still hiding down there. As soon as I started kind of getting back in here again, I found soap and paint. So I needed to repeat the process, but you get the idea. That's what I mean though. Look at how much paint was actually hiding down there. Okay, so you think your brushes are clean, but they are not. So rinse them, even if you dry it out a little bit, and then just do a little check like that, you know, kind of come down here to the bottom. You're going to find that it takes a lot more to clean your brushes thoroughly than it did with watercolor. So once it's clean, reshape it and let it dry flat. Don't upend it. Let it dry flat. Once it's dry, then you can, you know, store them up, right? But let it go flat first. All right, so I got to rinse this out again, but you guys will continue on.